Thank you for that, John. Now on the line we have Anthony Murphy, co-author of Island of the Setting Sun, In Search of Ireland's Ancient Astronomers. Good evening, Anthony.
Good evening, Ben. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you, and hope you are too. Now, your book launch is this week, Thursday, and I've had a quick preview, and I must say it's very good. It's definitely well rehearsed, and there's a bit of poetry, a bit of art in there as well. Tell us first of all the general theme of the book and where you got the idea.
Well, Ben, just under 8 years ago, Richard Moore, a local artist here in Drogheda, came to me. He was looking for help with a project. He wanted to construct some sort of a sculpture on the ground involving large standing stones pointing towards sun and moon and stars, but the problem was he didn't know any astronomy, and he didn't know the constellations, so he knew I was an astronomer, so he wanted some information. And what happened was, when we hooked up together, he started showing me things that he had found himself while he was painting in the Boyne Valley over the last 20 years, and that kind of led us down a different path, kind of researching the Boyne Valley in particular, but the Stone Age sites in the Boyne Valley, but not just exclusively the Boyne Valley. There are other sites in Lough Crew and Meath and Sligo also. And what we did was we were looking at mythology as well as how sites were aligned. And what we were finding was that the myths often seemed to carry astronomical information in them, and we found this at a number of different sites. So this is basically the end product of about 8 years of research on those lines, if you know what I mean.
And how far back into history or mythology did you go? How many thousands of years, presumably?
The Stone Age monuments of the Boyne Valley are over 5,000 years old. We're talking about a construction date for, say, Nowth, for instance, of 3,300 BC. And it's possible that the sites up at Lough Crew and Sligo are even older again. So we're dealing with something that's very, very ancient. In relation to the mythology, the academic sphere will not go as far as to say that the myths are as old as these sites. What they say is that many of the Irish myths and stories and legends were written down in the early part of the last millennium, around the centuries, the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries AD. But they were carried to that point from an unknown epoch in time by word of mouth. So we have an oral tradition in Ireland that stretches back a long way. But we actually found, when we examine the myths, certain myths correspond with what is happening astronomically at various sites, leading us to the belief that certainly some of the myths are actually contemporaneous with the ancient sites in the area.
Okay, so this would seem to further suggest, as we have suggested on this program before, that the Irish were perhaps the first astronomers in the world, perhaps even before the Greeks or Egyptians or Assyrians or Babylonians.
Well, there's the modern thinking on this whole area is a little bit skewed, to be honest, because there's a very heavy reliance on the belief that the classical world was what gave us our sciences and our study of astronomy. And then, the history books will tell you, we have actually said this in the introduction of the book, that the history books tell us that astronomy began with the Babylonians, the Chinese, and the Chaldeans. But what we're careful not to claim, unfortunately, is that we're not claiming that astronomy began in Ireland, but because there is evidence in other work that indeed the people, for instance, who painted the Lascaux caves in France, going back maybe 25,000, 30,000 years ago, studied the stars and maybe put representations in their paintings. But what we're certainly saying is that the people who inhabited Ireland over 5,000 years ago were accomplished sky watchers.
Okay, now you also mentioned in the book about, there's an article about Orion, or the figure of Orion carved into the Leinster landscape. Could you explain that to us, and where that idea, but where that discovery, if I can call it that, came from?
Yeah, no problem. What happened was that very early on, after meeting Richard, he showed me an Ordnance Survey survey map of the Loudmead area, and on this map he could see this figure of a man, and he showed it to me, and I have to say, to be brutally honest with you, and I say this in the book, I thought he was a bit demented or something, because I got the impression from him that he thought there might be something purposeful to this, that this might have been purposely laid down at some time in the past, and I kind of ridiculed the whole idea. But during the course of our 8 years of research, we have found evidence to suggest that indeed there might be something a little bit more to this than meets the eye, and that it may be more than just a coincidence. To give you an example, the figure is located in an area which was anciently called Ferrard. Now, Ferrard is from Ferrard, which means the high man, and he seems to be a representation of the constellation Orion on the ground, measuring from head to foot 12 miles, and from elbow to fist, as it were, 12 miles in the other direction. What we're looking at is what we think might be sort of an ancient endeavour on a grandiose scale, hitherto unknown.
They would need to have been good surveyors, I suppose. And what would be the purpose? Any ideas of what would be the purpose of doing such a large carving, for want of a better word, into the landscape?
Well, throughout the book, of course, we have to kind of make it clear to people that we're dealing with, in relation to the Stone Age sites, we're dealing with stuff that's 5,000 years old. We're dealing in the realm where we have to kind of speculate with certain matters. But the evidence seems to point us in a direction, and we've kind of taken that direction. Throughout the book, however, we have looked at, the whole inspiration that these people had for constructing these sites over vast distances. And what we kind of concluded is that there was a very large ritual, kind of religious aspect to what they did, tied in with the belief that their other world, in other words, the place to where the soul went to after death, was located among the stars. And that's very much evident in the body of mythic literature that we have today from ancient Ireland, as well as the fact that it ties in quite nicely with some of the sites. For instance, at Newgrange, we explore the myths about Newgrange that say, lend credence to the idea that the other world, or the path to the Irish other world, opened at specific moments when the sun was touching the ground, particularly at sunset. And, we've looked at, say, Tiernan Og, the land of eternal youth, and Mag Mel, the ancient Irish Elysium, the plain of happiness. And we very much see from the mythology that these were among the stars, and that the sun and the moon and the planets, as they drifted around the sky, provided the inspiration for many of the myths that we have today.
Okay, Anthony, thank you very much for that. It's a great book, easy to read, and as I say, a bit of poetry in there, nice artistry by your co-author Richard Moore, and it's published by Liffey Press. And hope to see you on Thursday at the launch. Actually, I'm planning on dropping in.
Look forward to it.
Any idea what this book's going to retail at?
Well, it's in the bookshops. It will retail at $29.95, but it is available currently on the Liffey Press website at theliffeypress.com for an introductory price of €25. So, if you get your order in now, you'll save roughly a £5 off the cover price.
Okay, Anthony, thank you very much indeed for that, and the best of luck with the book.
Thank you very much.
Great book, good read, nice, easy, pleasant reading, and mythology and astronomy on an Irish setting.
No.